The Crystal Star was released in 1994 and was written by Vonda in McIntyre and follows Leia as she is on a diplomatic mission on a faraway planet that she's trying to bring into the New Republic when her children are kidnapped by an evil warlord, and so she has to try to find a way to bring them back home and take care of this evil warlord, all while Luke and Han are setting out on a secret mission to deal with a religious cult that is near this white dwarf star, which is known as the Crystal Star. And so we have our story. Guys, I have been excited and also dreading this book. In fact, it has been a while since I have done a proper Legends Star Wars book review on this channel. It's been almost a year since I last did my one of the last books, Champions of the Force, and a lot of it has been I've been very burnt out on Star Wars. I just consumed so much over the course of a year that I needed a break, and also I kept trying and trying to get into this book, and I could only get about a chapter or two in before I just kind of gave up. And there are a lot of reasons for that. This book is infamous by many Star Wars fans as being the worst Star Wars book out there. And do I think that is a correct sentiment? Maybe, and maybe not. I think it's not as bad as people say it is, but it's definitely not good. In the end, it's mostly just very boring, and it does have some odd characterization. Characters do not act at all the way they should. Some of the dialogue is awkward. A lot of the characters are kind of stupid. And it does have this very weird story. This is a weird book. But sadly, whereas something like the Dark Prince series with, the short novellas like Glove of Darth Vader were, really not that good at all, they at least were silly and goofy and were easy reads. This was hard to get through because it's just a very dull book with a very dull story to tell, and it made reading it just not very entertaining, to the point where I knew I had to get past this book because I knew I wanted to read more of these books, but I had to get past this one, so I kind of caved in and I listened to the abridged audiobook because that's the only way you can consume this in audiobook form. There's not like a full length audiobook that's out there that I could find. And it did make it a lot more tolerable. And by the end of it, I was kind of glad that I didn't have to read through all of it because a lot of it is very dull. The dialogue is not that compelling. And it is strange because I have heard that this author, who had written, I think, some Star Trek books before this, or maybe after this, she had done some really good work, and she is a good author for the most part, from what I've heard. It's just maybe she's not a great fit for Star Wars, or maybe the story she was trying to tell just wasn't something meant to be told. And one of the biggest problems is how characters act throughout this book. They really act irrationally and really dumb. The main villain in particular, who is supposed to have been this dark Jedi that was trained by Darth Vader, is outwitted by children. And the moments where you are with Jaina and Jason and young Anakin, the Solo children, these are like reading baby stories almost. Like, McIntyre tries to make them sound like young children. It sounds like an adult that is trying to act like a child, or how a child would act, and it just doesn't feel natural at all. It's also just not a very engaging book. There's really not that much that goes on. This book is 400 some pages, and there's only about 12 or 13 chapters throughout it. So the chapters are very, very long, about 30 to 40 pages each. And so that makes for some really poor pacing issues that I found throughout it. And it was definitely something that I think this story works a lot better in the abridged audiobook form because so very little happens. And it's interesting because after reading something like the Jedi Academy trilogy, which also didn't have a lot going on in it, like there's not like a ton of plot that goes on in those books, but there's at least always something happening, and there's a lot of downtime in this book that made it pretty much a slog to read and also listen to. But it's not really all bad. It's just kind of mediocre. I think the prose, for the most part, are okay. They are serviceable. There are some fun moments here and there. I think the opening is kind of engaging because you're just kind of like thrown through a loop trying to figure out what is going on here. And there's some interesting setups, but not really great payoffs. Also, there's this great golden goop thing at the end that people are worshiping. And it's an interesting idea that just isn't utilized very well, but it does ask some very interesting questions about the Force and, what constitutes as something that is part of the light side and part of the dark side. And I wish those moral questions just came into play a little bit better with a stronger story because I think this honestly could have worked, but it's just not very interesting and like, I left it just very unimpressed. Now, it's not the worst Star Wars thing that I have read. The stuff with, the Dark Prince stuff, the Jedi Prince, whatever it's called, with like Glove of Darth Vader, that stuff is worse, but it is more entertaining, I will say, because I would be reading that stuff far before I revisit this. Maybe one day I will go back and revisit this book and actually read it and soak it all in, but I really don't have a desire to right now. But anyway, guys, with all that said, I'm going to give The Crystal Star a 5 out of 10. This is just not a very engaging Star Wars book. It's not the worst thing that I've read. It may very well be the worst Star Wars book out there, but I find it just more mediocre than anything. I still think that it's kind of a toss-up between this and Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which I really was not a fan of. But that one definitely had some very weird moments, and it is a shorter book, so I would maybe even say that this is worse than that book. But it's definitely not one that I recommend. But anyway, guys, I want to thank you for watching. It has been such a long time since I've done a Star Wars review here, and I plan on getting into more of them soon. I'm going to be reading one of the next Star Wars books, which starts out with the Corellian trilogy, but also before I do that, there is a series of comics that I want to continue on with, Dark Empire 2. So look forward to those reviews coming soon in the coming weeks. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and stay positive.